This has Oiler fans concerned as the Oilers offseason kicks off with a bang, but not in just one way. Yes, we will cover that today here on the channel. I mean, the loss still hurts, but you got to keep moving forward and move on. I mean, the Oilers, back-to-back Stanley Cup final appearances. Who knows? They might even throw a third one in there, but we will cover that today here on the channel. And 86% of you have not yet subscribed to the channel, so if you haven't done so already, what better time than now to hop on the Oiler wagon by subscribing here to Oilers Digest. Now let's get right into it now, shall we? With some news that we probably all saw yesterday, but of course we will cover that here on the channel with Ready Freddy. Now we all discussed yesterday, the chance of a Trent Frederic extension. We saw, the quote here from Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet saying Frederic is staying. I think there's an 8-year deal close to getting done there. We'll see what they do around him. And Frederic, by the way, I'm curious to find out what's going on with him because I don't think he was close to 100% healthy. Of course, he was dealing with the high ankle sprain there. And a bombshell dropped here by Frank Saravalli of Daily Faceoff says, don't expect the Oilers to announce a deal in the near future as they're engaging in talks with other current roster players. I mean, Evan Bouchard and Connor McDavid, for starters, but has been speculated. Expect Trent Frederic's next deal to get this, drumroll please, 8 years in north of 3.5 million, but south of 4 million in AAV, so something around 3.75. Now, 8 years for a non-superstar player. I'm not a big fan of long-term deals for guys that aren't extremely crucial here to the team. I'm sure a healthy Trent Frederic would get me to change my mind on him. But 8 years, and that doesn't even drive the price down lower than 3.75 or around 3.75 approximate, not exact. But again, yeah, I don't know what to think about this deal at all. I mean, again, it might prove me wrong, but I would have rather done something shorter, like 3 or 4 years. You can see here in the 2024-25 playoffs, 22 games played, 1 goal in the crucial Game 6 against the LA Kings, 3 assists for a total of 4 points for a +1 there. And again, Trent Frederic for the most part was a non-factor in these playoffs here, but you know what, he had a fantastic fight with Nick Hague in one of the games that really defined this Oiler playoff run, their Game 4 against the Vegas Golden Knights. So you know what, Trent Frederic, he did do something. He had that. I mean, it's a whole lot better than nothing here. But just, trying to think of, more things to say about Trent Frederic. I mean, 56% wins above replacement there. 65% even strength offense when it comes to, the percentile of NHL players. He's a guy when healthy, crashes around the net, crash and bangs around the net, I should say, pounces on loose pucks. I mean, the even strength defense, it's not like he's completely useless. There is a player there with Trent Frederic, and then 66th percentile in finishing there. So again, offensively, a two-way power forward there. You can never have enough of those, but again, at the 4 million price point, or again, reiterate here, it's not exactly going to be 4 million, but again, at that price point with the term, very, very questionable there. But when it comes to all the analytics, I've seen some analytics that was sort of support the type of player Trent Frederic is. I mean, he had a pretty good shooting percentage in Boston there, so hopefully he keeps that up. But this is the summer of sticker shock, according to Jay Fresh. The cap is going up, but my argument is the cap is going up. That doesn't really mean you have to start overpaying players there. But a $4 million contract next year looks like a 3.7, and so on and so forth. This is relative to the cap percentage based on NHL projection. In a few years further on down the road, 31, 32, 4 million looks like 2.7. That's just the way cap percentages work. When the cap goes up, the price points start to look a whole lot better. So I mean, there's a silver lining in that there with Frederic, and that just pretty much means that Evander Kane is on the way out here in the in oil country here with the emergence of Trent Frederic. With the price point that the Oilers paid to acquire him at the trade deadline, I think they wanted to see what they could fully get for their money by giving them the term and amount of money. Of course, when it comes to Scotia Stat here on Twitter, their projection, 2 years at a little over 2.4 million there, and I would have been happy with that. I would have been very happy with that sort of, like again, another prove me type of contract there. You have a good 2 years, and then you can get a bigger payday than that there. But the Oilers, hopefully, they can learn from their mistakes from the Lucic deal there. 7 years at 6 million. I would have preferred, something like a Zach Cassian type deal, 4 years at 3.2. I think that would have been a perfect contract situation here for Frederic. 4 years, it's not too long, but it's also not too short here at the same time. And I think, with the way that Trent Frederic plays on the ice, when healthy, of course, we didn't really see that throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs, or even the one regular season game that we saw Trent Frederic play, where he only played, I think it was maybe less than 5 minutes against the LA Kings there on the road. But Oil Country always loves a power forward that is not afraid to get around the net, because they sure as hell could have used that during the Stanley Cup final, right? But again, the past is the past. But hopefully this proves us wrong, like the Zach Hyman type deal. When he signed that, 7 years at 5.5 million. Everyone was like, at the start, was like, oh yeah, that's not going to age well here for the Oilers. But I mean, halfway through that deal, and Zach Hyman has been worth every single penny here. And hopefully, when we're halfway through, the Frederic deal at the 4-year mark, hopefully we can say the exact same thing there. But, as I mentioned, Evander Kane, from Trent Frederic to Evander Kane, one power forward potentially out the door, and another one coming on in there. But with Evander Kane, we all saw, the shenanigans this season there with LTIR, and how the Oilers are going to spend that money, if they're going to even spend that money at all. We were unsure on his status, not electing to get the surgery on his hernia there, and multiple other things that Evander Kane was dealing with until further on in the season there. But the Oilers, because of that, are now under the microscope there with LTIR, and how exactly they use that with Evander Kane, because when a Canadian team does that, the NHL will step in there. But with Florida winning last night, 3 of the last 5 Cup champions have had a player making at least $9.5 million on LTIR until Game 1 of the playoffs. Of course, Tkachuk on LTIR, allowing the Panthers to acquire Seth Jones. So the NHL, are they going to look at the Florida Panthers? One would hope, right? Nope, they are looking at the Oilers, despite the final chapter of the Oilers season being written at the Stanley Cup final. Sources say the NHL plans to continue to examine Edmonton's use of long-term injury reserve salary cap relief with forward Evander Kane in days and weeks ahead. The NHL may require more info to satisfy itself that the Oilers complied with the CBA when Kane returned for the second game of round 1 against the LA Kings after not appearing in a single game during the regular season. We all expected Evander Kane to be ready for Game 1 of round 1 there, but many are saying, because of the questions and the scrutiny the Oilers being put under from the NHL, this is why he didn't return until game number 2. And of course, the NHL is still deliberating on next steps. There is the potential for retroactive punishment if the league finds the spirit of the CBA was violated. No team in the salary cap area has been punished for LTIR usage, despite the hot button issue and no shortage of complaints in recent years. We all mentioned when I went over LTIR before the season, those that entire era there, what the Oilers are going to do cap wise, and I learned a lot about the salary cap, the CBA, and LTIR. But Mark Stone of the Vegas Golden Knights going on LTIR, and the Vegas Golden Knights piling up for the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Tampa Bay Lightning with Nikita Kucherov, the Panthers with Matthew Tkachuk. Now, of course, when the Oilers do it, when a Canadian team does that, sure, that is when the NHL decides to step in there. And of course, no punishment. Nobody really knows what the punishment will be, because this has never happened before. Could be draft picks, could be money. The last time the NHL fined a team that severely was the Arizona Coyotes there with their old draft combine nonsense there. So again, this could be groundbreaking here for the NHL, but it just makes no sense. Like, when a Canadian team does it, that's when they decide to throw the rule book at them, as you can see here with Roberto Luongo announcing his retirement from the NHL. The NHL, of course, punishing the Canadian team there, the Vancouver Canucks, by making them pay more in the cap recapture penalty compared to the team that he actually retired with the Florida Panthers there. And of course, from Kevin McCurdy, I'll get the right picture here, folks. Kevin McCurdy seems to, recall the Oilers being screwed by the league 3 times before in implausible or barely plausible fashion in recent memory. I mean, Kevin McCurdy, his father Bruce McCurdy, one of the best Oiler writers, and Kevin following in the footsteps here, and he's helping us remember how exactly the league hasn't been in Edmonton's favor over the past couple of years. They were charged a third-round draft pick after the league extrapolated the number of goals James Neal scored to put them over a conditional threshold, even though Neal didn't actually score those goals. He quote-unquote might have. The Oilers had to give a third-round draft pick to the Calgary Flames, and that's just not it. They also charged Edmonton draft picks as compensation when they hired Chiarelli and McClellan, but promptly removed the short-lived policy for being stupid. But they did not return Edmonton its picks. And then lastly here, when Duncan Keith retired, the Oilers did not get a cap recapture benefit, even though they would have been entitled to it, which accounted for approximately $3 million in cap we should have been owed there. But so far, sources said the Oilers complied with all the NHL's requests for information and medical opinions, as is typical with any LTIR return scenario for the playoffs, which are scrutinized by the league. It does remain unclear what exactly the NHL may have found issue with as they continue to examine the circumstances there, and the Oilers felt like they haven't violated that at all there, because I mean, if a team is compiling with all of the NHL requests and they're giving them anything and everything regarding with Evander Kane in his situation, clearly they don't have anything to hide, but the NHL thinks otherwise because they are located north of the border. But that is it for today's video. Let me know down in the comments what you think about the Trent Frederic contract there. What would you have given him? Or would you have let him, walk right to free agency there? Very curious to see what you all have to say about that in the comments. And also, the Evander Kane situation. Again, when an American team does it, the NHL looks the other way, but with Gary Bettman and his band of clowns, not surprised by this whatsoever. But take care, everybody. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't. I'm Matt. Have a great rest of your day.